In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and people moved like rivers on sidewalks, there lived a young woman named Maya. She was in her mid-20s, with warm brown eyes that sparkled even when life got tough. Every morning, she would wake up before sunrise, tie her scarf tightly around her neck, and head to her usual spot at the corner of Fifth Avenue. There she'd set up her small flower stall, a wooden cart filled with fresh roses, daisies, sunflowers, and marigolds. Maya wasn't just selling flowers, she was spreading smiles. Whether it was a businessman rushing to work or a tourist lost, in the city's maze, Maya greeted everyone with kindness. "Good morning, would you like some flowers today?" she'd ask cheerfully, holding out a bright bouquet. Some bought because they needed them, others simply couldn't resist her charm. For many customers, those moments spent chatting with Maya felt like a brief escape from their busy lives. But behind her cheerful smile lay a story of struggle. Maya hadn't always been a flower seller. Years ago, she had a family, a loving mother who taught her how to braid garlands and a father who told her bedtime stories about faraway lands. But tragedy struck when she was only 16. Both her parents passed away within months of each other, leaving her alone in the world. With no one to turn to, Maya dropped out of school to work odd jobs, cleaning houses, washing dishes, anything to make ends meet. Eventually, she discovered her love for flowers and started setting up her little stall. The streets of New York weren't kind to someone like Maya. Life as a street vendor came with its own set of challenges. Policemen often stopped by, accusing her of blocking the sidewalk or not having the right permits. Sometimes they demanded bribes, threatening to confiscate her cart if she refused. Despite these hardships, Maya held on. Her flower stall wasn't just a source of income. It was her lifeline, her connection to humanity, and the only thing keeping her dreams alive. What kept Maya going through all this was something precious she carried with her every day: a diamond ring. It wasn't flashy or gaudy, but delicate and elegant, sparkling softly under the sunlight whenever she adjusted it on her finger. This ring wasn't something she bought. It was a gift from her late mother. On her deathbed, her mom had slipped it onto Maya's hand, saying, "This ring has been in our family for generations. Keep it safe. It will remind you of us no matter what happens." For Maya, the ring was more than jewelry. It was a piece of her past, a symbol of hope, and a promise that she wasn't truly alone. Even during her darkest days, when hunger gnawed at her stomach or tears blurred her vision, the ring gave her strength. She wore it proudly, never taking it off, believing it protected her somehow. One sunny afternoon, however, things took a turn for the worse. As usual, Maya was arranging her flowers neatly on the cart, humming softly to herself. Business was slow that day, so she decided to step away for a few minutes to grab a quick bite from a nearby food truck. When she returned, she found two police officers standing next to her cart, inspecting it closely. "Excuse me, miss," one of them said sternly. "Do you have permission to sell here?" Maya nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I've been selling here for years. No one ever complained before." The officer frowned, clearly unimpressed. "That doesn't matter. You're obstructing public space. Pack your stuff and leave." Her heart sank. She tried explaining politely, pleading with them to let her stay since she hadn't caused any trouble. But instead of listening, the officers grew impatient. One of them pointed at her cart and said, "If you don't move, we'll arrest you." Fear gripped Maya. Arrested? For selling flowers? It seemed absurd, but she knew arguing wouldn't help. Still, desperation made her stand her ground. "Please, sir. I need this job. I have nothing else." Her words fell on deaf ears. Within minutes, handcuffs clicked around her wrists and she was led away, leaving her cart and her dignity behind. As she sat in the cold, sterile confines of a jail cell later that evening, Maya clutched her ring tightly, trying to hold back tears. How could this happen? What would become of her now? Little did Maya know that fate works in mysterious ways. Unknown to her, a man passing by earlier had noticed the commotion near her cart. A billionaire tycoon with a broken heart, he had been searching for answers about his missing daughter for years. Something about the young woman being taken away caught his attention, especially when he glimpsed the ring on her finger. It looked eerily familiar, too familiar to ignore. Thus began a chain of events that would change Maya's life forever. From the depths of despair, she was about to be thrust into a world beyond her wildest imagination. But first, she had to face the hardest question of all. Who was she, really? And what secrets did the ring hold that could rewrite her entire story? Across the bustling streets of New York, in a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, lived a man whose life seemed perfect on the outside but was crumbling within. This billionaire, known for his sharp suits and commanding presence, had built an empire from scratch. He owned skyscrapers, factories, and businesses that spanned continents. Yet, despite all his wealth and power, he carried a weight heavier than anything money could buy: grief. 3 years ago, his daughter had disappeared without a trace. They had fought bitterly over her future. He wanted her to step into the family business to carry forward the legacy he had worked so hard to build. But she dreamed of something else entirely. She wanted to travel the world, camera in hand, capturing moments instead of boardroom deals. Their argument ended with harsh words, and the next morning she was gone. At first he thought it was just another teenage rebellion, a phase she'd grow out of. Days turned into weeks, then months, and finally years. No phone calls, no letters, nothing. Private investigators were hired, posters were put up, rewards were offered, but the trail went cold. The billionaire spent sleepless nights staring at old photographs of her, wondering if she was safe, if she was happy, or worse, if she was even alive. But recently, a glimmer of hope appeared. An old acquaintance, someone who owed him a favor, called him late one evening. "I think I saw your daughter," the man said hesitantly. "Or at least someone who looks like her. She's selling flowers near Fifth Avenue." The billionaire's heart raced. Could it really be her? Or was this just another dead end? Desperate for answers, he decided to investigate himself. Early the next morning, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket to blend in, he set out toward Fifth Avenue, his mind buzzed with questions. What if it was her? What would he say? Would she forgive him for their last fight? As he approached the corner where the flower stall supposedly stood, he noticed something unusual. Police officers were dismantling a small wooden cart covered in wilted flowers. Curious, he walked closer and asked one of them, "What's going on here?" The officer shrugged. "Illegal vendor. Refused to pay the fine, so we arrested her." "Arrested?" The billionaire repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "For selling flowers?" "That's right," the officer replied nonchalantly. "She'll be processed soon enough." Something about the description, the young woman, the flower stall, stirred something deep inside him. Without wasting another second, he pulled out his phone and dialed his lawyer. "Find out everything you can about this arrest," he instructed firmly. Then, tapping into the connections his wealth afforded him, he made sure he'd get access to see the arrested vendor as soon as possible. When he finally arrived at the precinct later that day, he felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The officer on duty raised an eyebrow when he saw the well-dressed man walking in. "Can I help you?" he asked gruffly. "I'm here to see the woman you arrested earlier today," the billionaire said confidently. "The flower seller." The officer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request. "Sir, she's in holding. We don't usually allow visitors unless—" "Unless what?" The billionaire interrupted, his tone firm but calm. "Look, I have reason to believe she might be someone very important to me. Just let me see her for a moment. If I'm wrong, I'll leave quietly." Reluctantly, the officer agreed. A few minutes later, the billionaire was led to a dimly lit room where a young woman sat, her head bowed low. Her hands were cuffed and her clothes were wrinkled, but there was something undeniably striking about her. Her posture was dignified even in such a bleak setting. As he entered, she looked up, startled by the sudden intrusion. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The billionaire's breath caught in his throat. She bore an uncanny resemblance to his daughter, the same hazel eyes, the same soft features. But it wasn't until his gaze fell on her right hand that his heart nearly stopped. There, on her finger, gleamed a diamond ring. It was unmistakable. He recognized it instantly. It was the very same ring he had gifted to his daughter on her 18th birthday, custom-made with intricate details only he and his wife knew about. How could this stranger possibly have it? His voice trembled as he pointed at her hand. "Where did you get that ring?" he demanded, trying to keep his composure. The young woman blinked, confused by the intensity of his question. Slowly, she replied, "It belonged to my mother. She gave it to me before she passed away." The billionaire's mind reeled. Was this some bizarre coincidence? Or was this girl truly connected to his daughter? Determined to find out, he leaned closer, studying her face intently. "Tell me more about yourself," he urged. "Where are you from? When did your parents pass away?" She hesitated, wary of revealing too much to a complete stranger. But something about his urgency and the raw emotion in his eyes made her trust him. In halting sentences, she began sharing fragments of her story, how she grew up in foster care after losing her parents, how she struggled to survive on her own, and how the ring became her anchor through difficult times. Each detail sent chills down the billionaire's spine. Some parts didn't align perfectly with his daughter's timeline, but others matched eerily well. Her age, the year her parents died, even the mention of a family heirloom. Could it be possible? Could this girl sitting before him actually be his long-lost daughter? Desperate for clarity, the billionaire made a decision. Using his influence, he arranged for her release, promising to cover all legal fees and ensure she wouldn't face further trouble. As they left the precinct together, the young woman glanced at him nervously. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. He sighed, his expression pained yet hopeful. "Because I think you might be someone very special to me, someone I've been searching for a long time." Her eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering immediately, he led her to his car and drove her to his penthouse. Once inside, he showed her photographs of his daughter, pictures taken during birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings. "This is my daughter," he explained gently. "Her name is Emily. Do you see any resemblance?" The young woman studied the photos carefully, her hands trembling slightly. There was no denying the similarities between herself and the girl in the pictures. But how could this be real? How could she, a simple flower seller, be the missing daughter of a billionaire? Overwhelmed, she sank onto the couch, clutching the ring tightly. The billionaire knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out together," he promised. "Whatever the truth is, we'll face it. Together." And so, the journey to uncover the truth began. Little did either of them know that the answers they sought would change both their lives forever. The billionaire's penthouse was unlike anything the young woman had ever seen. It was a world of polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Central Park, and furniture so elegant it looked untouched. Yet despite its grandeur, the atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken questions. The girl, still unsure whether to trust this man or not, sat awkwardly on the edge of a plush white couch, her fingers nervously tracing the band of the ring she wore. For his part, the billionaire paced back and forth, visibly struggling to contain his emotions. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this really be his daughter? Was he finally going to get answers after 3 long years of searching? He wanted to believe it with every fiber of his being, but he knew better than to jump to conclusions without proof. "Tell me more about yourself," he said softly, sitting down across from her. "Start from the beginning." She hesitated, for a moment unsure how much to reveal, but something about the sincerity in his voice made her decide to open up. Taking a deep breath, she began recounting her story, the tragedy that had shaped her life. "I don't remember much about my early childhood," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "My parents passed away when I was 16. A car accident, they told me. After that, I ended up in foster care. It wasn't easy. Some families were kind, others not so much. Eventually, I left the system as soon as I turned 18. I worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, washing dishes, anything to survive. Then, one day I found an old flower cart in a junkyard. I fixed it up, bought some cheap flowers, and started selling them on the streets. That's been my life ever since. Her words painted a picture of resilience, a young girl fighting against all odds to carve out a place for herself in a harsh world. The billionaire listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When she finished speaking, there was a long silence. Finally, he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "You said your mother gave you this ring before she passed?" he asked gently, pointing to her hand. She nodded. "Yes. She told me it was special, that it had been in our family for generations. I've kept it with me ever since." Hearing this, the billionaire's heart clenched painfully. He remembered the day he had given that exact ring to his daughter. It was her 18th birthday, and he had spared no expense to make it perfect. The ring was custom designed, featuring intricate patterns that held personal significance to their family. There was simply no way anyone else could have it unless— "I need to ask you something," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Do you know your birth date?" The question caught her off guard. "Why does that matter?" "Just humor me," he urged. After a brief pause, she replied, "It's March 12th. His breath hitched. That was the same date as his daughter's birthday. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place, but he needed more. Something concrete, undeniable. "We can settle this once and for all," he said firmly. "Let's do a DNA test. If you're truly my daughter, we'll know for sure." The young woman blinked, taken aback by the suggestion. A DNA test? It sounded so clinical, so final. What if the results came back negative? Would she go back to her old life, pretending none of this ever happened? And what if they confirmed what he suspected? Could she handle stepping into the life of a billionaire's daughter? Seeing the uncertainty on her face, the billionaire softened his tone. "I understand this is a lot to take in, but think about it. You deserve to know the truth, just as much as I do. No matter what happens, I promise I'll support you. Whether you're Emily or not, you've already shown incredible strength, and I respect that." His words struck a chord deep within her. For so long, she had carried the weight of her struggles alone. Now, here was someone offering her not just answers, but also a chance to belong, to find the family she thought she'd lost forever. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next few days, arrangements were made swiftly. The billionaire used his resources to expedite the process, ensuring the results would come back as quickly as possible. In the meantime, he invited her to stay in his penthouse, insisting she wouldn't feel comfortable in her usual surroundings while waiting for such life-changing news. At first, living in the billionaire's home felt surreal. Everything was so different from the modest, chaotic existence she was used to. The staff treated her with deference, calling her Miss and fussing over her needs. Meals were served on fine china, and the rooms smelled faintly of expensive perfume. Despite the luxury, however, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, an imposter in a world that didn't quite fit. To ease her discomfort, the billionaire spent hours talking to her, sharing stories about his life and his family. He spoke fondly of his late wife, describing her kindness and warmth. He talked about his dreams for his daughter, admitting regretfully that he had pushed her too hard, expecting her to follow a path she didn't want. Through these conversations, she began to see him not just as a powerful businessman, but as a flawed, grieving father desperate to reconnect with the child he loved. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over the city skyline, she mustered the courage to ask a question that had been weighing on her mind. "If the test says I'm your daughter, what happens then?" He turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "That's entirely up to you," he replied honestly. "You're not obligated to step into any role you don't want. You're your own person, and I'll respect whatever choice you make. All I want is for us to have a relationship, to be part of each other's lives again." His answer reassured her somewhat, but doubts lingered. What if she couldn't live up to his expectations? What if she didn't fit into his world? These questions swirled in her mind as the days dragged on, each one feeling longer than the last. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The billionaire received a call from the lab confirming that the results were ready. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope containing the report. As his eyes scanned the page, tears welled up uncontrollably. Turning to the young woman, he whispered hoarsely, "It's you. You're Emily." Time seemed to freeze. She stared at him, unable to process what she'd just heard. Her mind raced with conflicting emotions: shock, disbelief, joy, fear. Was this real? Was she truly the missing daughter of a billionaire? Before she could respond, he pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as though afraid she might vanish again. "I thought I'd lost you forever," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But now you're here. We're together again." Tears streamed down her face as the reality sank in. She was Emily Langley, the girl who had once dreamed of traveling the world with a camera in hand. And yet, she was also Maya Patel, the resilient flower seller who had built a life on her own terms. Somehow, both identities coexisted within her, each shaping the person she had become. As they sat together, processing the revelation, the billionaire vowed to give her time to adjust. He understood that this discovery would change everything, but how much of her past self would remain? Only time would tell. The days following the DNA results were a whirlwind of emotions for both Emily, formerly known as Maya, and the billionaire. While the test had confirmed their connection, it also opened up a floodgate of questions about identity, belonging, and what the future held. For Emily, the revelation was bittersweet. On one hand, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief to finally know where she came from, to understand the gaps in her memory that had haunted her for so long. But on the other hand, she couldn't ignore the fear creeping into her mind. What if stepping into this new life meant losing the person she had worked so hard to become? The billionaire, sensing her inner turmoil, gave her space to process everything. He didn't bombard her with expectations or demands. Instead, he let her take the lead. Every morning he'd ask gently, "How are you feeling today?" And every morning her answer varied, a mix of excitement, confusion, and hesitation. To help bridge the gap between their worlds, he began introducing her to his lifestyle gradually. One day he took her shopping, not because he wanted to dress her up like a princess, but because he thought she might enjoy picking out clothes that made her feel comfortable and confident. At first, Emily hesitated, overwhelmed by the rows of designer dresses and sparkling accessories. She had spent years wearing hand-me-downs and thrift store finds, and the opulence felt foreign, almost intimidating. "I don't need all this," she said quietly, fingering the fabric of a silk blouse. "I'm fine with what I have." He smiled warmly, understanding her resistance. "This isn't about needing anything, it's about choices. You've spent your whole life making do with less. Now, you get to decide what makes you happy." His words struck a chord. Slowly, she started selecting pieces that resonated with her. A cozy sweater, a pair of sturdy boots, a scarf that reminded her of the ones she used to wear on chilly mornings at her flower stall. By the end of the trip, she had a small collection of items that felt like a blend of her old life in this new chapter. Another day, he invited her to visit his office, a towering skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan. As they stepped off the elevator onto the top floor, Emily was greeted by sleek glass walls, bustling employees, and panoramic views of the city. The contrast between this world and the streets where she once sold flowers was staggering. "This is what I've been building my whole life," he explained, gesturing around the room. "But it's just bricks and numbers without family, without someone to share it with." Emily listened intently as he walked her through the operations, explaining how the company worked, the people it employed, and the impact it had on communities worldwide. Despite herself, she found it fascinating. Growing up, she had never imagined being part of something so vast, so influential. Yet even as she absorbed the information, she couldn't shake the nagging thought. Was this really who she was meant to be? That night, back at the penthouse, she sat by the window staring out at the glittering skyline. The billionaire joined her, handing her a cup of tea. They sat in silence for a while before he spoke. "You seem troubled," he said softly. "What's on your mind?" She sighed, setting the cup down. "I keep thinking about who I am. Am I Emily Langley, the daughter of a billionaire? Or am I Maya Patel, the flower seller who fought to survive on her own? I don't know how to reconcile those two parts of myself." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to choose one over the other, you're both. Your strength, your resilience, that's who you are. This life doesn't change that. It simply adds another layer to your story." His words comforted her, but they didn't erase the uncertainty entirely. Over the next few weeks, Emily continued grappling with her dual identity. During the day, she explored the privileges her newfound status afforded her, attending charity events, meeting influential people, learning about industries she'd never considered before. But at night, she often dreamed of her flower stall, the familiar faces of customers, and the simple joy of arranging blooms under the open sky. One evening, as they dined together, she voiced a thought that had been brewing in her mind. "What if I could combine the two worlds, my love for flowers and your business expertise?" The billionaire raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Well," she began, warming to the idea as she spoke, "flowers bring people happiness. They brighten spaces, celebrate milestones, express emotions. What if we created something that combined beauty with purpose? Like eco-friendly flower shops that support local farmers and give back to the community." Her eyes lit up as she described her vision: boutiques filled with fresh, sustainably sourced flowers, workshops teaching floral artistry, partnerships with charities to provide jobs for marginalized groups. To her surprise, the billionaire didn't dismiss the idea. Instead, he leaned forward, genuinely interested. "That's brilliant," he said, smiling. "It's exactly the kind of innovation I've always encouraged in my companies. Let's make it happen." With his backing, Emily threw herself into the project. She visited local farms, learning about sustainable practices and fair trade. She sketched designs for her stores, blending rustic charm with modern elegance. She even reached out to former customers from her flower stall days, asking for feedback and ideas. Each step brought her closer to creating something meaningful, a legacy that honored both her past and her present. As construction began on the first boutique, Emily realized how much she had grown since the day she was arrested. Back then, she had been scared, unsure of her place in the world. Now she stood tall, confident in her ability to navigate challenges and adapt to change. The ring on her finger no longer felt like a relic of a forgotten past. It symbolized continuity, a thread connecting her to her roots while guiding her toward the future. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. At a high-profile gala celebrating the launch of her venture, surrounded by wealthy investors and socialites, Emily found herself longing for the simplicity of her old life. She missed the sound of coins clinking in her hand after a sale, the laughter of children buying daisies for their mothers, the camaraderie of fellow street vendors sharing snacks during slow hours. Sensing her unease, the billionaire approached her. "Are you okay?" he asked, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I miss it sometimes," she admitted. "The streets, the freedom, the connection with people. Will I ever feel like that again?" He smiled, his gaze softening. "You'll find new ways to connect. That's who you are. You bring light into people's lives, no matter where you are. And if you ever want to go back to the streets, even for a day, I'll stand beside you." His words reminded her that she wasn't alone anymore. No matter how much her circumstances changed, she still carried the same spirit that had guided her through the toughest times. With renewed determination, she embraced her role as both Emily Langley and Maya Patel, a woman bridging two worlds, proving that strength and grace could coexist. Little did she know, the journey was far from over. There were still lessons to learn, relationships to nurture, and dreams to chase. But for now, she was content knowing she had found not just her father, but also herself. The grand opening of Emily's first eco-friendly flower boutique was just days away, and the anticipation in the air was electric. The shop, nestled in a trendy neighborhood near Fifth Avenue, had been transformed into a haven of beauty and purpose. Its walls were painted a soothing shade of green, adorned with shelves holding terracotta pots filled with fresh herbs and succulents. A large chalkboard displayed messages like, "Bloom where you're planted," and "Flowers that give back." Every detail, from the recycled paper wrapping to the solar-powered cash register, reflected Emily's vision of blending sustainability with elegance. For Emily, this moment felt surreal. Just months ago, she had been selling flowers from a rickety wooden cart on the same street where her boutique now stood. Now, she was preparing to step into a role she never imagined for herself: entrepreneur, innovator, and leader. Yet, as exciting as it all was, she couldn't shake the lingering doubts that whispered in the back of her mind. Would people accept her? Could she live up to the expectations, not just of her father, but of herself? On the morning of the big day, Emily woke up before sunrise, too nervous to sleep. She slipped on one of the outfits she'd picked out during their shopping trip, a simple yet chic dress paired with sturdy boots, and headed to the shop early. The staff, hired carefully based on her insistence of creating opportunities for underprivileged individuals, greeted her warmly. Together they arranged bouquets, polished counters, and double-checked every last detail. By noon, the boutique buzzed with activity. Customers streamed in, drawn by the promise of unique floral arrangements and a cause worth supporting. Some came because they recognized Emily's story, the flower seller turned billionaire's daughter turned business owner. Others came simply because the shop exuded charm and authenticity. Whatever their reasons, they left smiling, clutching fragrant bouquets and chatting animatedly about how much they loved the place. Amidst the chaos, Emily found herself gravitating toward the checkout counter. It wasn't just nostalgia that pulled her there, it was the connection she craved. For years, selling flowers had been more than a job. It had been her way of touching lives, even if only briefly. As customers approached the counter, she greeted them with the same warmth and sincerity she always had. "Thank you for coming," she'd say, handing over their purchase. "I hope these flowers bring joy to your day." Her presence made a difference. People noticed. They lingered longer, asked questions, shared stories. One elderly woman teared up as she recounted how her late husband used to surprise her with daisies every anniversary. Another customer, a young man in a suit, admitted he was buying roses for his first date in years. Each interaction reminded Emily why she had fallen in love with flowers in the first place. They weren't just decorations, they were carriers of emotion, tokens of love, gratitude, and hope. As the afternoon wore on, the line outside the boutique grew longer. Reporters arrived, eager to capture the story of the young woman who had risen from humble beginnings to create something extraordinary. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust in her face, and questions flew at her from all directions. At first, Emily felt overwhelmed, but then she remembered her father's advice, "Be yourself." Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "I didn't plan for any of this to happen," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "A few months ago, I was just someone trying to make ends meet, selling flowers on the street. Life threw challenges my way, but it also gave me strength. When I discovered who I really am and where I come from, I realized I didn't have to choose between being the person I was or becoming someone new. I could be both." She paused, glancing down at the ring on her finger. "This ring reminds me of my mother, who taught me resilience. It reminds me of my father, who showed me what it means to build something meaningful. And it reminds me of myself, the girl who dreamed of making the world a little brighter, one flower at a time. So today, as we open this shop, I want to honor that dream. These flowers aren't just products, they're symbols of hope, community, and second chances." The crowd erupted into applause, moved by her heartfelt words. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment, struck by the authenticity of her message. Her father, watching from the sidelines, felt a swell of pride. This was his daughter, not just in name but in spirit. She hadn't let wealth or privilege dull her compassion or dim her light. Instead, she had channeled it into something beautiful. But while the day was a resounding success, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with its own set of challenges. Running a business required more than passion. It demanded discipline, strategy, and resilience. There were days when orders piled up faster than the team could handle, leaving everyone exhausted. Other times, critics questioned whether her venture was sustainable or merely a fleeting trend fueled by media attention. Through it all, Emily relied on the lessons she had learned on the streets: patience, perseverance, and the importance of staying true to oneself. One evening, after a particularly grueling week, she sat with her father in the penthouse, sipping tea and reflecting on everything that had happened. "Do you ever regret telling me the truth?" she asked suddenly, surprising even herself with the question. He looked at her, startled. "Of course not. Why would you think that?" She shrugged, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. "Sometimes I wonder if things would have been easier if I stayed Maya Patel, the flower seller. No pressure, no spotlight, just freedom." He studied her for a long moment before responding. "Freedom is a funny thing. It doesn't mean having no responsibilities or expectations. True freedom is knowing who you are and choosing how to live your life. Whether you're selling flowers on the street or running a chain of boutiques, you're still the same person inside. Don't lose sight of that." His words resonated deeply with her. Over the next few months, Emily continued expanding her brand, opening additional locations across the city. Each store carried the same ethos as the original: eco-friendly practices, community involvement, and a commitment to spreading joy through flowers. Along the way, she stayed grounded by maintaining her connection to the streets. Once a week, she returned to her old corner near Fifth Avenue, setting up a small pop-up stand and selling flowers directly to passers-by. It was her way of reminding herself and others that success shouldn't erase humility. Meanwhile, her relationship with her father deepened. They spent hours talking about everything from childhood memories to future goals. He encouraged her to pursue her dreams without fear, while she helped him see the value of slowing down and appreciating the present. Together, they navigated the complexities of their bond, learning to forgive past mistakes and cherish the moments they had now. As the months turned into a year, Emily's boutique became more than just a business. It became a movement. Local schools partnered with her to teach students about sustainability. Charities collaborated with her to provide job training for marginalized groups. Even celebrities began endorsing her brand, praising its mission and impact. Through it all, Emily remained humble, always attributing her success to the people who supported her along the way. Yet perhaps the most profound change was within herself. She no longer saw her life as divided into two separate identities: Maya Patel and Emily Langley. Instead, she embraced the duality, recognizing that each part of her journey had shaped who she was today. The struggles, the triumphs, the losses, and the discoveries. They were all threads woven together into the tapestry of her existence. And so, as she stood behind the counter of her flagship store one quiet afternoon, arranging a bouquet of sunflowers, Emily smiled softly to herself. Life had thrown her curveballs, tested her limits, and forced her to confront truths she hadn't been ready for. But through it all, she had bloomed, not unlike the flowers she loved so dearly. As the months rolled by, Emily's flower boutiques flourished, becoming more than just places to buy flowers. They were symbols of hope and resilience. Each shop had its own personality, yet they all shared the same core values: sustainability, community, and beauty. The flagship store near Fifth Avenue remained her favorite, not because it was the first, but because it held so many memories. From the bustling grand opening to quiet afternoons spent arranging bouquets, it felt like home. One crisp autumn morning, Emily arrived at the boutique earlier than usual. She carried a small box tucked under her arm, its contents carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Today was special. It marked exactly 1 year since the day she opened her first store. To celebrate, she had planned something personal, something that would honor the journey she'd been on and the people who had supported her along the way. Inside the shop, the staff greeted her with hugs and congratulations. They had become more than employees. They were family. Many of them had faced hardships before joining Emily's team. Some had struggled with homelessness. Others had battled addiction or poverty. But here, they found purpose. Together they created magic, turning simple blooms into works of art that brought joy to countless lives. Emily gathered everyone around as the morning light streamed through the windows. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This past year has been incredible, not because of how much we've grown, but because of who we've grown with. Every single one of you has made this dream possible." She opened the box and revealed what was inside. Custom-made pins shaped like sunflowers, each engraved with a unique message. "These are for you," she said, handing them out. "They're reminders of why we do what we do, to spread light even in the darkest corners." The gesture touched everyone deeply. Some wiped away tears while others cheered, holding up their pins proudly. For Emily, it was a moment of pure gratitude, a reminder that success wasn't measured by money or fame, but by the connections forged and the lives impacted. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned and the pace slowed, Emily took a seat by the window, watching people pass by. Her father joined her shortly after, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her and sat down beside her, his eyes scanning the room. "You've done amazing things," he said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Your mother would have been so proud." Emily smiled softly, tracing the rim of her cup. "Do you think she'd recognize me? The girl who used to run around barefoot in the garden?" He chuckled, nodding. "Absolutely. You still have that spark, the same determination, the same heart. Losing her was hard, but I see pieces of her in you every day." The mention of her mother stirred bittersweet emotions. Though Emily had no conscious memory of her, she often imagined what she might have been like based on the stories her father told. A kind woman who loved nature, a talented gardener who could coax life from even the stubbornest soil. In many ways, Emily felt connected to her through the flowers they both cherished. "I wish I could remember her," Emily admitted quietly. "But sometimes, when I'm arranging flowers, I feel like she's there, guiding my hands." Her father reached over, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "She is, and she always will be. Memories don't disappear. They live on in the things we love, the choices we make, the people we touch. That's how legacies work." His words lingered in her mind long after he left to attend a meeting. Legacy. It was a word she hadn't thought much about until now. Growing up on the streets, survival had been her sole focus. But now she realized that her actions rippled outward, affecting others in ways she couldn't always see. Whether it was providing jobs for those in need, supporting local farmers, or simply brightening someone's day with a bouquet, she was leaving a mark, a positive one. That evening, as the boutique prepared to close, a familiar face walked in. It was an elderly woman Emily recognized from the early days of her flower stall. Back then, the woman had been a regular customer, often buying daisies for her late husband's grave. Today, she carried a weathered photograph in her hand. "Remember me?" the woman asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course," Emily replied warmly. "How could I forget? You always said daisies reminded you of him." The woman nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I came here today because I wanted to. Thank you. Your flowers helped me heal when I didn't think I could anymore. And now, seeing what you've built, it gives me hope. Hope that kindness can grow, just like these flowers." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She hugged the woman tightly, grateful for the reminder of why she started this journey in the first place. When the woman finally left, clutching a fresh bouquet of daisies, Emily stood by the door watching her walk away. The encounter reinforced everything she believed in, that life's greatest achievements weren't about wealth or recognition, but about making a difference, however small. Over the next few weeks, Emily continued expanding her brand, adding workshops and events to engage the community further. People came not just to buy flowers, but to learn, connect, and share their stories. One workshop, titled "Blooming Through Adversity," drew participants from all walks of life. Together, they discussed challenges they'd faced and how they'd overcome them, using flowers as metaphors for growth and renewal. By the end of the session, strangers had become friends united by their shared humanity. Through it all, Emily stayed true to herself. Despite the demands of running a growing business, she never lost sight of the values that defined her. She still visited her old corner near Fifth Avenue occasionally, setting up a small stand and chatting with customers as if nothing had changed. These moments grounded her, reminding her of where she came from and the person she had always been beneath the layers of change. One night, as she stood on the balcony of her father's penthouse overlooking the glittering city below, she reflected on how far she'd come. Life had thrown her curveballs, tested her limits, and forced her to confront truths she hadn't been ready for. Yet through it all, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more whole. Her father joined her, leaning against the railing. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his tone gentle. "Everything," she replied, smiling. "Where I started, where I am now, and where I'm going. It's funny. When I was selling flowers on the street, I never imagined any of this. But looking back, I realize every step led me here, even the hard ones." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Life has a way of working itself out, doesn't it? As long as you stay true to who you are, the rest falls into place." Emily glanced down at the ring on her finger, the same ring that had sparked this entire journey. It no longer represented loss or uncertainty. Instead, it symbolized connection, resilience, and second chances. She had found her place in the world, not by abandoning her past, but by embracing it fully. And so, as the city lights twinkled below and the cool breeze brushed against her face, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. She had bloomed against all odds, proving that beauty could rise from struggle, that roots could anchor even the wildest dreams. Whatever the future held, she knew she was ready, for challenges, for triumphs, for whatever life chose to throw her way, because at the end of the day, she was still the same girl who believed in the power of flowers to bring joy, healing, and hope. And that belief, more than anything else, would guide her forward. The months following the first anniversary of her boutique chain were a whirlwind of activity for Emily. Her brand continued to grow, gaining recognition not just locally but nationally. Magazines featured her story, calling her a social entrepreneur, and praising her innovative approach to blending business with compassion. Yet despite the accolades and attention, Emily remained grounded. She knew that success wasn't about headlines or awards, it was about impact. And she was determined to keep making a difference, one flower at a time. One chilly winter morning, as snow blanketed the streets of New York, Emily decided to visit the flagship store herself. The air smelled crisp, and the city seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath against the cold. Inside the shop, warmth greeted her, not just from the heaters humming softly in the background, but from the laughter of her team as they prepared for the day ahead. Today was special. It marked the launch of a new initiative close to her heart, Winter Blooms. Winter Blooms was Emily's way of giving back during the holiday season. For every bouquet sold, a portion of the proceeds would go toward providing meals and warm clothing for families struggling through the harsh winter months. But it wasn't just about donations. It was also about community involvement. Volunteers from local shelters and charities helped arrange bouquets, earning wages while learning new skills. It was a small step, but Emily believed even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples. As customers began trickling in, their faces lighting up at the sight of vibrant flowers amidst the gray winter landscape, Emily moved around the shop, lending a hand wherever needed. She tied ribbons, wrapped bouquets, and chatted with visitors, sharing the story behind Winter Blooms. Many left not just with flowers but with smiles, inspired by the idea that something as simple as buying a bouquet could help someone else stay warm and fed. Later that afternoon, a group of volunteers arrived from a nearby shelter. They were hesitant at first, unsure of what to expect, but Emily welcomed them warmly, showing them how to trim stems and arrange blooms into beautiful compositions. As they worked side by side, conversations flowed naturally. Stories of hardship mingled with moments of hope, creating bonds that transcended differences. By the end of the day, the volunteers didn't just leave with paychecks. They left with renewed confidence and a sense of belonging. That evening, after closing the shop, Emily sat alone among the empty vases and scattered petals, reflecting on the day. Despite the exhaustion tugging at her bones, she felt fulfilled. This was what she had always wanted, to use her passion for flowers as a tool for change. Yet, as content as she was, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought that had been lingering in the back of her mind lately. What next? Her father had often encouraged her to think bigger, to expand beyond New York, maybe even internationally. While the idea excited her, it also intimidated her. Could she handle the pressure? Would scaling up dilute the authenticity of her mission? These questions swirled in her head as she locked up the shop and headed home. When she arrived at the penthouse, her father was waiting for her, sipping tea by the fireplace. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening when he saw the tired yet satisfied look on her face. "How did it go?" he asked, gesturing for her to join him. "It went well," she replied, sinking into the couch beside him. "The volunteers loved it, and so did the customers. We raised enough money today to feed dozens of families." He smiled proudly. "That's incredible. You've come such a long way." She nodded, staring into the flickering flames. "But I can't stop thinking about what comes next. Everyone keeps telling me to expand, to dream bigger. And part of me wants to, but another part is scared it'll ruin everything we've built." Her father leaned back, considering her words carefully. "You know, when I first started my company, I faced the same dilemma. Growing too fast can be risky, but staying stagnant isn't the answer either. The key is to stay true to your values no matter how big you get. If you focus on why you started this, the people, the purpose, you won't lose yourself in the process." His advice resonated deeply with her. Over the next few days, she spent hours brainstorming ideas, jotting down notes, and sketching plans. Slowly, a vision began to take shape, one that balanced ambition with authenticity. Instead of rushing to open stores across the country, she decided to focus on partnerships. Collaborating with local florists and artisans in different cities, she would help them adopt sustainable practices while amplifying their reach. That way, she could spread her mission without losing the personal touch that made her brand unique. With renewed clarity, Emily threw herself into the project. She traveled to nearby towns, meeting with florists and farmers eager to learn from her experiences. Together they explored eco-friendly techniques, shared resources, and celebrated each other's successes. Word spread quickly, and soon, inquiries poured in from farther afield: Chicago, Los Angeles, even international cities like London and Sydney. Each collaboration brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. In Chicago, she partnered with a nonprofit that trained formerly incarcerated individuals in floral design. In Sydney, she worked with indigenous communities to incorporate native plants into arrangements, honoring both tradition and sustainability. Everywhere she went, she left behind not just knowledge but connections. Bridges built on mutual respect and shared goals. Back in New York, life continued to evolve. Her relationship with her father deepened further, becoming a source of strength and guidance. They spent weekends exploring the city together, visiting museums, trying new restaurants, and sometimes simply walking through Central Park, talking about everything under the sun. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly whole, not just as an individual but as part of a family. Yet even as her professional and personal life flourished, Emily never forgot where she came from. On quiet mornings, she still visited her old corner near Fifth Avenue, setting up a makeshift stand and selling flowers directly to passers-by. Some recognized her, others didn't, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the fleeting yet meaningful exchanges that reminded her of her roots. One spring morning, as cherry blossoms bloomed along the sidewalks, Emily stood at her pop-up stand, arranging a bouquet of tulips. A young girl approached, clutching a handful of coins, Her coat was patched, her boots scuffed, but her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "How much are these?" she asked shyly, pointing to the tulips. Emily smiled, kneeling down to meet her eye level. "They're free for you. Pick whichever one you like." The girl's face lit up as she chose a bright yellow tulip. "Thank you," she exclaimed, hugging the flower tightly before running off to show her mother. Watching her go, Emily felt a familiar warmth swell in her chest. This was why she did what she did, not for fame or fortune, but for moments like this. Moments that reminded her that everyone, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, deserved beauty and joy. As the seasons changed and the years passed, Emily's journey continued to unfold. Challenges arose, victories were celebrated, and lessons were learned. Through it all, she remained steadfast in her belief that life, like flowers, thrived on care, patience, and love. Whether she was standing behind a checkout counter, speaking at conferences, or mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs, she carried that belief with her, a guiding light illuminating her path forward. And so, surrounded by the people she loved and the work she cherished, Emily embraced the future with open arms. She had started as a flower seller on the streets, unsure of who she was or where she belonged. Now she stood tall, a beacon of hope, resilience, and grace. Life had taught her many things, but perhaps the most important lesson was this: no matter where you come from or what obstacles you face, you have the power to bloom. All it takes is courage, faith, and a little bit of sunshine.